Well, hey everybody, this is Don with Wizard Tower Games. Thanks for tuning into my live tonight. As I promised, it is 8 o'clock. It is Tuesday, December 5th, and we're going to talk about editing. We're going to talk about what the different types of line edits are versus copy editing, proofreading, developmental edit. We're going to talk about costs, what you should be paying, what you shouldn't be paying, how to vet an editor. So if you publish games or thinking about publishing a game or putting a game out there or a book, this is going to be probably pretty informational video for you. Hope everybody's doing good this evening. Basically, I'm just going to dive right into it, and that is you pretty much have 4 different types of edits. And the reason why an edit is important, I think, is that you are judged by the work that you put out. So if you go ahead and you put out a really poorly edited piece of work, like a game as an example, then your game is going to look unprofessional. And editing is a hyper critical part of game design and book writing. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach editing. So I thought what I would do first is we would talk a little bit about the different kinds of editing, the differences. You hear a lot of terms like, is it a proof edit, a line edit, a copy edit? The basic one is called the proofreading. Excuse me. Proofreading, basically what that does is it looks for errors in grammar, syntax, spelling, punctuation, formatting. It's a precursory walkthrough of the game or the book. You could, if you have a good proofreader, they might catch some of the more glaring issues with things like maybe some plot holes that you have, or if you use some repeated words. Like my bad habit when I talk on videos, I use the term a lot, and I'll probably do it tonight. But basically, that's what a proofread is. And between all 4 of them, this is really where you should start. When your work is done and you think it's done, you should find a good proofreader. Now, a proofreader and an editor are 2 different skill sets, I think. It's a proofreader. Like I had a publishing company, and I used to hear from authors all the time that, my mom is really good with the English language, or I have a sister who's an English teacher. Those would be good people to do a proofread, because they just catch maybe the glaring stuff. But that's a proofreader. An editor has very specific skill sets. Now, what should you be paying for something like a good proofread, as an example? There's a lot of different factors into it, but a proofread should be, on average, you're paying about 1.5 cents to 2.3 cents a word. You could pay more, you could pay less. It all depends. Again, it is just, it just depends. It depends upon who you're dealing with. It depends upon how many people, like I said, just a whole bunch of, don't mean to get off on a tangent here about that, but editing is vitally critical to doing game design and or publishing. Now, the next type of edit is, and there's 2 different kinds that kind of meld in together. There's a line edit, and then you have copy editing. Now, what a line edit is going to do is it's going to deal mainly with general style, content, language use. It'll usually point out improvements in work, issues with overused words and phrases, punctuation, spelling. It's a line by line edit, and it's probably one of the more uncommon edits, because most of the time people either just do a proofreading than a developmental. Most games and most books don't need all 4. You could pretty much get away with a proof and a developmental. The big thing with a line edit is it's probably the 3rd most expensive edit you can do. You're going to pay anywhere between 3 cents and 3.5 cents a word. Doesn't sound like much when you have a game, like a game module, but when you're doing something such as like a 200,000 word novel, it can get expensive. But you're talking about the average game module probably has about 2,500, 3,000 words. So it's fairly economical. But keep in mind the pricing I'm giving you um, will go up if you're giving an editor a smaller amount of work. Like as an example, a proofreading is 1.5 cents to about 2.3 cents. But if you give them a game module, they might charge you 3 or 4 cents a word. Lesser the work, they want to make some money. They don't want to make $25 on a module they're going to spend 4, 5, 6 hours with. Now, real quick is another question I used to get all the time when and I get it now when I talk to certain people about game design, is they say, well, what's the big deal? Why do you really need an edit? And it goes right back to what I talked about earlier. And that is, when you submit a work to the general public and it has glaring spelling or grammatical errors, you're going to look unprofessional. And, we all have seen on Twitter and on Facebook, where someone says, well, here's a sample page. And people go, oh, looks great, love the content. But you always have those people that come in and they just love to nitpick and tear apart the work. Even if you tell them that this is a pre-edited work, there's always a few that get in there and like to throw it out at you. So the idea behind it is well-edited work means professional appearance. And, another thing that you really need to be careful about is when you have something like a book or a module, you want to make sure that, especially on the cover and on the back, on the preamble or the little description on the back, you definitely want to make sure that you are not having spelling errors or issues. The next type of editing I'm going to talk about is a thing called copy editing. The copy editing gets into more of the mechanics, ensures the manuscript follows things like standard English and whatever house style guide that you use. Most writers who write follow the Chicago style, manual style, but games are very unique because games are educational. So you're not telling a story necessarily. Like with a game module, you're telling a story, but you're also instructing. So it's a really unique kind of edit that they've done. And that's why I really suggest, instead of doing a line edit or a copy edit, initially do a proofread, catch the major stuff, and then when you're done correcting the proofread, get into your developmental edit. A copy edit is going to run about 2 cents to 3 cents a word. That's on average. Again, the bigger the work, the cheaper they charge per word. A game module with 5 or 7, 10,000 words, you may have on a copy edit, you might go ahead and have anywhere between 3 and 5 cents again. It just depends. Shorter the work, the more you're going to get charged. Now, the last one that we're going to spend a lot of time on is the developmental edit. The developmental edit, I think, is the most important edit that you as a game designer or an author can go ahead and engage in. The developmental edit identifies pretty much everything: plot holes, character arcs, story arcs, pace, action, sequences, flow, your tropes, your dialogue. A good line editor will go ahead and they'll make suggestions on how to improve your work. And this is where your ego is really going to take a dive. And this is where I tell my fellow game designers, and I'm a game designer and I'm also an author, and I tell authors, when you get your developmental edit back from your editor, you need to take your ego and you need to set it aside. You're going to open up that thing and you're going to see characters that you think were really interesting and really good. You're going to see dialogue that when you wrote it, you thought was really clever. And your developmental editor could tell you, no, this is what's wrong with it. This is what the problem is. They may take a set of action that you worked on for days, and the action sequence, the battle was something that you read many, many times and were so proud of, and you get it back from your developmental editor, and the developmental editor has basically tore it apart and reconstructed it. That's what a good developmental editor does. And there's a reason why they do that, is because when you write something like a game or you write a novel, you are so close to it. You are so, you're going from head to fingers and you're typing. And yeah, we all pause and we read what we have to say, but then what ends up happening is we all want to like what we write. we all have our own style of writing. You can see it on social media a lot of times. People have a very distinct style that they reply. It's the same thing with writing. And when you get into game design, especially, the game design is really unique because you're not just telling that story. You're also telling them how to play it. You're intermixing two drastically different styles of writing or of producing a work. So your development editor, will do things to your work that you're not going to like. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know any author or any game designer who had a developmental edit come back and they just looked at it and was happy about the whole thing. My development editor will do it and I'll take a look at it and I'll go, but I like that character. I have a friend named Steve, and Steve writes science fiction. And I always joke with Steve because Steve has his favorite characters he has a 5-book series, science fiction series. And I always joke, why don't you kill a couple of them off? He's like, no, can't do that, because he likes his characters. He's attached to them. And this is kind of more novel writing than it is game modules. But when you write large books, like I have a 280,000 word 2-book series, there's characters in my book that I liked. I follow my development editor's suggestions, even though I liked the character. And that's an important distinction that, as somebody who writes and as somebody who's at a publishing company, as somebody who has a game company, I cannot stress enough that when you get your development edit back, you have to put your ego off to the edge. Trust your developmental editor. Now, how do you find a good developmental editor? We all go, like, you go to a writing group or a game group and say, who does edits? And you see all these people saying, I do. If they have a website, a good way of doing it is you go to their website. Why do you go to their website? You're not looking for pricing. Go through all their pages. If they're a developmental editor or an editor, period, and they have a website that they do business on, then their website should be really tight as far as grammar, punctuation. It should read right. Shouldn't have anything funky going on with it. That's test number one right there. If you have a very important body of work, like a large game as an example, let's say you developed your own role-playing game. I'm all for approaching the developmental editor because it's a big job and saying, listen, if I'm going to pay you between 4 cents and 7 cents a word to do a developmental edit on my work, and that's what it basically runs. Average role-playing game could be 50,000 words in a book. It could be upwards of 60, 70, 80,000 words because it might be multiple. You might have a GM's guide and a player's handbook. Well, then what I suggest you do is when that editor comes to you, you go to that editor, say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and give you a section, like maybe 10 pages. I want you to do a developmental edit on it. I want you to do a developmental edit on this as a test. Now, if they want just a little bit of money, great. It's better to spend $20, $30 and get the test and find out that they are not worth a damn than it is to hire them and they spend, like, I'll give you an example. Years ago, I produced a role-playing game, and full-fledged role-playing game, and I hired a friend of the family to do a line edit, and I paid her really well. It was an absolute abysmal. She missed the most basic of misspellings. She missed the most basic of punctuation, grammar. There was errors where I made mistakes in, like, not letting rules get connected properly and such. So you got to be really careful about that. But the idea, again, behind a good development edit is a good developmental editor will help you a lot. They will, especially with like a game that has rules and such. What they'll do is they'll tell you, well, you said this was the mechanic in the beginning of the book under core mechanics, but later on when you were talking about magic, you said something different that did not make sense. Or they'll tell you important things like, I'm reading your role-playing game, and this section of the role-playing game, you're not getting your point across. You didn't teach me nothing. I don't understand what you're saying. So make sure also that when you look for a developmental editor, someone to edit a game as an example, make sure they have experience or they have knowledge of how games work, because some developmental editors, they don't know what role-playing games are. They don't understand that. But a good developmental editor, even if they've never edited a role-playing game or a game module before, should they should be able to go through it, because a good developmental editor worth their salt will go ahead and be able to pull it out. Now, most people will tell you who work in editing, they want you to go through all four. And they want you to go through all four because they make more money when they go through all four. But my suggestion to you is, if you're going to go ahead and edit, whether it's a book, whether it's a game or it's a game module, could be something simple as board game rules. And that's another thing you got to be really careful of. Even if it's board game rules, you need to have an edit done. Don't trust yourself. I don't trust myself. I don't trust myself as far as I can pick up my car and carry it when it comes to editing, because I know what my faults are. And you really need to understand that about yourself. You may be highly educated, and you may have a very good grasp on the English language, but you're going to be surprised when you get that developmental edit back, or that even proofreading back, and you'll be going, wow, I typed that twice, 2 words in a row, misusing they, there, there. Those are big ones that people miss, because it's not that you're uneducated or you're dumb. It just means that you're typing. You're jamming out work. You are creating. You're in the groove. And it's really hard when you're in that groove. Even if you pause and say, okay, I'm going to reread my work, you'll be surprised. You'll go over words that you have typed twice. Guaranteed you will. So, anyone have any questions? Anyone have any comments? Okay. Well, this should be a very short video then. Like I said earlier, editing sounds very straightforward. Editing is very straightforward. But the thing with editing is, it's vitally important to be able to step away from your work when you have it done, and to go ahead and listen to your editor. If you're not going to trust them, or at least look at what they're saying, then you shouldn't waste the money. Real quick before I go, I want to talk about, how do you find a good editor? I talked earlier about, you can go into gaming groups, or you can go into author groups and say, I need to find me an editor. The problem is, for every 10 editors that say, I'm a great editor, the problem is, well, you're going to get probably one of them out of 10 is actually a decent editor. Don't look at price. Don't look at price. There's a lot of people out there that, like, it's the same thing with, game artwork. It's the same thing with people who do layout and such. Cheap is not always better. My suggestion is a couple different things. One, go to their website if they have one. If they don't have one, why? You're a professional editor. You're in business to do this. How come you don't have a website describing your editing services and such? I have kind of a personal rule. If you say you are a business and you don't have a website, I don't usually want to deal with you very much, unless you are a true home-based known person, because when they put a website out, that shows that they have, and they say, this is what I do for a living. I mean, I'm an editor for a living. You should have a website. That's just my thing. Yeah. If you have a Facebook, I want to see, and this is another thing. If they say, well, I have a Facebook account and a Twitter, great. Go to their Facebook. What you want to see on their Facebook is, you want to go ahead and read their posts. Are their posts punctuated and spelled correctly? Another thing to look for is you look for, like, as an example, do they have the reviews turned on? If they're an editor, they should have the reviews turned on. If they don't have the reviews turned on, don't deal with them. They're hiding. That's a bottom line fact. If they offer a service like publishing, editing, book layout or manual layout, game layout, that type of thing, they should have a section for reviews, because Facebook allows it. So they should have public input. Another thing is, I would ask them to say, where can you give me this? This is a really good sneaky one that you can do to them. Is, you have an editor approach you and they say, I can edit your role-playing game. Have you ever edited a role-playing game before? Even if they say no, how many books have you edited? And are they on Amazon? And if they say yes, they're on Amazon, say, do me a favor, send me links to 4 of the books that you've edited on Amazon, 3 or 4. Then you go to Amazon, you click on the links, you make sure that they're listed as the editor. And then you do the little, preview where you can go look at the first chapter or 2. That's what you do. You click that little preview and you can do a little PDF walkthrough and you look through their book and you can see if they, you can look at the quality of their work right there. And you can see the quality of their work. It's a way to get around them. Another thing is always ask for references. Who have you worked with before? They give you a name. You go on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and you look up that name. You go make sure, is that a published author or is that just a buddy that they had went ahead and, helped out and just worked with real briefly? Are they a published author? So website, if they don't have a website, they got a Facebook, fine. Do they have the reviews turned on? Look at their posts, look at public interaction, look how they interact with public on their social media. Reach out to them after they say, hey, I can do your job, and tell them I want to see links on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble doesn't have a preview, sadly. Amazon does. Amazon's preferable. So they give you 3 or 4 links. Go look at the little preview tab for each book that they have edited. And then if they're not listed as the editor, reach out to the author. And usually most authors keep social media. Most authors are very cognitive, and so are game companies. I mean, people reach out on social media. We answer our social media. So that's editing. 21 minutes, a little bit, about 22 minutes. This was going to be a brief one. Just wanted to make sure that I just kind of covered the basics of it. I know editing is not something that's exciting. It's not controversial, but it's critical. Whether you're a game publisher, whether you're a game writer, a game creator, whether you're an author, it is absolutely critical that you go ahead and you get at least a proofread and a developmental edit, excuse me. Not doing it, you're not doing yourself. You're not doing your game or your book, and you're sure as hell not doing your game players or your readers any favors. Anyone who edits their own work, you're doing yourself a disfavor. You really need that. You need that set of eyes that has never looked at it before. Even with my work, like I said, I'll go right back to it real briefly, is, almost 300,000 word 2-book series. And just what I saw my developmental editor do to my book, my story, I look back at it now, and again, I had to put my ego off to the side. I was just like, wow, I'm blown away. This is just I was kind of amazed, actually, because she made my book better. That's what a good development editor will do. They'll make your book better. So this is Don, Wizard Tower Games. Hope everybody had a good night tonight. I hope you got a little bit out of my editing video. Like I said, I know it was not the greatest exciting video that you're going to see from me, but it might be one of the most important videos I post about, if you really want to make sure that you have the best work possible that you submit to your readers or your game players. So hope everybody has a good night. Have a good Tuesday. And this is Don, Wizard Tower Games, signing out.